Hi everyone, Scruffany-Faced Tano here, internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Soap&Skin album, From Gas to Solid / You Are My Friend. This is the newest full-length album from Austrian singer-songwriter Soap&Skin, who we have not heard from in a studio album capacity in about 6 years at this point, not since 2012's Narrow, which was a pretty unique record of art pop and chamber pop. The LP featured a mix of these hushed, beautiful piano songs, which were incredibly haunting, incredibly dreary, and topped with the womanly and haunting voice of Anya Franziska Plaschk. Now, there were also a couple of tracks on this thing that featured very ominous and heavy, almost industrial-ish instrumentation, moments that not only made for major high points on this album, but also set Anya apart from a lot of other singer-songwriters out there. And this was also a pretty scant record at 30 minutes in length. I was hoping that whatever else came down the pipe eventually, as far as a new album, would be larger in terms of sound and scope. But sadly, From Gas to Solid and You Are My Friend is really neither of those things, despite being a longer album. The simple art pop piano songs for Anya are back once again, but the tone and atmosphere of these tracks is noticeably lighter, so not nearly as dark and despondent, but somehow still really slow and patience testing. And on top of it, unfortunately, the songs aren't nearly as compelling either, which is truly unfortunate because part of Narrow's appeal for me was that the songs were so wonderful at their core that it didn't really matter how fast or upbeat they were played, they still resonated, they still shined. Unfortunately, I cannot say that is the case for cuts on this thing like This Day, which features this descending lead vocal melody that after a while gets quite tedious, cycles with no real progression or resolve, it mostly just kind of meanders. I do like the song's lyrics. It would seem Anya's singing about being trapped in a destitute and corrupt society. The track's weepy violin accompaniment is kind of a nice touch too. It's just a shame that it's not all hitched to a better song. And even though I found the song Italy kind of pleasurable on the first listen, once I kind of heard it in the context of the record, it sort of reached a similar place for me too, where the track's key vocal melody after a while just got really tiresome, really basic. The songwriting just felt super thin despite the heavier sound on this track with droning pump organs and massive bass. I mean, I don't necessarily mind on paper that Soap&Skin is trying to change things up instrumentally on this record into a timbre of sounds that may play over a little better with like indie fans, like the marching snares and twanging, ringing lead melodies and pianos on the song Atham, or the completely unexpected synth odyssey on the song Falling. The problem is, though, is that the instrumental additions on these tracks feel really just sloppy. Or maybe they're just awkwardly applied, they feel sort of unsure. Like each piece of new instrumentation or melodic idea doesn't quite know what it should be doing, where it should be standing. So most of it is just kind of like haphazardly filling space because it has to be there. I think the song Foot Chamber is another prime example of this, though this song stood out to me because the tune is so faint and almost non-existent to the point where it can barely carry the horns and pianos, the vocal harmonies, all of which come together like in a nasty, drunken lullaby. Which again is a shame because a lot of the instrumentation on this thing sounds like it was recorded pretty well. It could sound much prettier or even much darker had the writing been better. The song Surrounded is maybe the biggest anomaly on the entire record in that it features a pretty well-written song combined with some tastefully executed and assembled instrumentation that comes together into a very powerful and invigorating climax with a wall of strings and soaring lead vocals. It's such a focused and well-groomed cut that is completely counteracted by other songs on this thing whose inclusion into this record are just perplexing. Like the closing track on this record, which is the slowest and shoddiest cover of What a Wonderful World I have ever heard in my entire life. And generally, I'm all for the idea of taking popular songs and slowing them down to the point where they basically become a depressive dirge, but the execution is really kind of shaky. The very spaced out piano chords, the lead vocals, it just feels very off. And not really in a dark, surreal, or unsettling way. Then there are cuts on this thing like Creep, This Is Water, as well as the track Palindrome, which comes off like a very artsy religious chant. Songs that feel more like song sketches or stretched out interludes. There's not really a strong song or musical idea at the core of these cuts, they mostly just provide filler in the track list. It would be easier to overlook the inclusion of these tracks if the songs they were surrounded by carried more weight to the point where you needed a bit of a breather in between songs. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and all these tracks really end up doing is just killing time. Unfortunately, this is just not really the album I hoped it would be at all. And not even really just in terms of, oh, Anya changed her sound, it's a total flip or whatever. I mean, sure, while there are some instrumental palettes on this record I didn't necessarily expect, for the most part, what really keeps this album from succeeding is the songwriting is just much more lackluster than it was on the last album, even Anya's previous EP. Had that, as well as the arranged instrumentation on this thing, been better, I could see my way to liking the brighter and lighter sound of this record much more. I'm feeling a light to decent 4 on this thing. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Soap and Skin, forever.